Ottawa is set to present a spring economic update on Tuesday that is expected to show progress on some of the big-ticket investments and government spending reviews from the fall budget. The federal government has been under pressure from the opposition for deficit spending and for the pace of getting shovels in the ground on some of those major projects. Dawn Desjardins is Deloitte's chief economist, and Sahir Khan is the co-founder of the Institute of Fiscal Studies and Democracy. I spoke with both of them about what they're expecting from the update. Dawn Desjardins and Sahir Khan, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
Dawn, I'm going to start with you. Deloitte had a report earlier this month paring back your forecast for growth in this country. So I want to ask the same question of both of you. Dawn, I'll start with you. How would you characterize the state of the Canadian economy right now?
Well, it's soggy. We have lots of uncertainties that businesses and Canadians at large are having to deal with, whether it's rising fuel costs or uncertainty about how we're going to transact with the U.S. So we do see pretty modest growth as we go through the course of this year.
Okay, and Sahir, how about you?
Yeah, I think all the risks that we saw in the fall budget with kind of U.S. trade drag on the economy and that kind of hinge moment issue, well, it's actually worse, right, with the war in the Middle East and, some dampening of consumer confidence in Canada. So, yeah, I think this update's going to have to reflect, growing uncertainty in the economic environment.
Okay, so Sahir, I'll stay with you for a moment. How will it reflect that? Does the government need to show progress on capital investment and return on investment? Does it need to show that it has reserve funds if things get worse? Yeah. What would you be watching for?
Yeah, actually, I'd be watching for all three. I think, first of all, the planning environment's got to be explained. What are the different scenarios the government's considering? What are the contingencies? How does that translate into a fiscal picture for the government? Like, what are going to be the impacts of revenue that become lower, more volatile? And what does that mean for kind of the fiscal framework going forward? And how much room do they have? And, what kind of barriers or buffers are there in case, there's still greater uncertainty in the future or greater risk to the economy? I think the second part of it is, I'm going to be looking for really, I think, execution. I think execution risks now is going to dominate fiscal risk. Where are we with these projects? What are the constraints? What are the obstacles to getting these things done? I think the government, I'm looking for a dashboard that starts to tell us where are we going to be. And I think lastly, I think this idea that, setting realistic expectations with Canadians, I think the Prime Minister started with that in his talk about forward guidance, but I think we're going to have to hear more of that kind of realism in this planning environment going forward.
Yeah, Dawn, I mean, as you said, it's the instability that keeps the economy shaky and sort of the unknown. How much is the review of CUSMA, the ongoing sectoral tariffs, the sort of lack of clarity about whether there's progress being made, how do you think that's impacting the Canadian economy and businesses right now?
Well, whatever you look at in terms of metrics of what businesses intend to do, do they intend to spend, invest? Those metrics aren't showing a lot of good news. They're not looking at putting money to work because they're all, as we all are, extremely nervous about what's it going to look like? Where's demand going to be? Now, I think the government is doing the right things, diversifying our trade relationships. But again, in order to actually, say here's where to execute on this, we need infrastructure put in place, and we need to have confidence that this is going to go forward. So I think these are the building blocks that will, we think, get Canadian businesses to invest, but it's going to take some time.
The fact that the government announced on Friday another LNG expansion in British Columbia, it wasn't one that was hugely controversial, but I wonder, Dawn, whether you think that is a sign that investors would be looking for and whether it could spur something.
Absolutely. I think all of these announcements, so again, getting things going, as well as reducing hurdles and impediments to businesses getting involved and getting a return on their investment over a reasonable time frame. So any of these changes, whether it's to the policies or actually, getting shovels in the ground, that type of thing, I think will be really crucial to see this improved a flow of investment dollars into Canada, whether it's from our domestic businesses or from international investors.
So here, part of the challenge, I think, and you mentioned it there, for the government is delivery, and so much of what they have, or they're trying to put in the window, is really big things, long-term things. Would you expect to see some growth in the update because of some of these investments, these early investments or early indications, or is it too soon?
Yeah, I think a lot of these really big projects are kind of long term. I think what an update kind of provides is a forum for a signal. Where are they?
Right.
I think there are, from what we understand inside government, there's still a lot of challenges in terms of getting stuff out the door, getting deals done, the execution side of this stuff. D&D has a really big, national defense has a really big agenda on capital projects, but we haven't seen any fundamental structural change within the department that would lead you to believe that things are going to move a lot faster in procurement than they did before. I mean, that can change, but I think the government has to start to explain what that path looks like. What does implementation look like? And if there are impediments, how are they getting around them? Because the economy, as Dawn said, the economy doesn't respond to the announcements or the fiscal allocations. It responds to the action, the shovels on the ground when people are hiring, when they're investing. And I think we've got to see how that progress is kind of evolving through this government's agenda.
Dawn, what would you be looking for in terms of the deficit? There's always obviously a focus by journalists on that number and by the opposition on that number. Would you expect that perhaps they've been able to whittle it down because of an increase in revenue?
Maybe a little bit, but the other thing, we've also had some spending changes as well, right? We did have the food and essentials, the surcharge or the charge on fuel being reduced on a temporary basis, the home builder. So there's some offsets there. So, maybe we don't see a lot of change, but that's probably okay.
Yeah, so here they have, though, also been moving forward aggressively on public service cuts, and I don't know if that will be reflected as well.
Yeah, I think two things that, John said, kind of under the hood. The economy might perform a little better than what was forecast in the budget. But you're going to have potentially a little bit of a temporary windfall if national defense, major capital projects aren't progressing at the pace they expected. So that's a lapse, and that'll show up. And the other issue is, they're reallocating a lot of spending. So we're really good to know how the public sector cuts are going and whether they're able to kind of respend that money. So again, that's about the progress, and a good place to kind of tell Canadians where they're at on their agenda is this fiscal update.
I'll end on this, and this is more of like a layman's question for people like me. Dawn, if you were Canadian, just a regular Canadian, and you are dealing with all these real life impacts, what would you be looking for there? Would it be a new measure on affordability? Would it just be to see signs that the economy is doing okay? What would be the thing to watch for?
Well, I think, as I've said, we've already seen some measures to attack that pillar of unaffordability or affordability. So it is just looking at, how are we going to progress? Because I think right now, Canadians are really ready to invest. We know we need to do it. And so I think it is just seeing that path. What does that path exactly look like? And how will we measure the results? So I think giving us a clear sign that, things are progressing and you should look for this, in 12 months' time. Those are the types of things as a Canadian, I'm looking for.
Sahir?
Yeah, I agree. I think the watchword for me is confidence. Businesses invest and consumers spend when there's confidence. And I think the government can do that two ways. One is being really transparent about progress, but also being very realistic about the plan, the uncertainty, and some of the contingencies. And I think that dose of realism is going to help ground public expectations going forward. I think the majority is going to help. I don't think the government's going to be worried about committees as much as they were in the past, and so I think they can be more aggressive. I suspect that they can, start to attract staff and public service leadership that they need to get this stuff done. So hopefully that's part of this plan and the signal that we get out of this update.
Okay, Dawn Desjardins, Sahir Khan, nice to see you both. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Good to be here.
Don't have to tell you this, but Canadians are feeling the strain of rising costs. And while political leaders stress social programs, that temporary fuel tax cut to provide relief for some, it is not enough. Keely Corrigan is one of those Canadians, and I spoke to her earlier this morning from Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. Keely Corrigan, nice to see you this morning.
Nice to see you too. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, there's so many Canadians dealing with this high cost of living, all sorts of different expenses. I wonder, what is the biggest expense for you right now? What is the thing that's really making things tight?
My biggest expense right now would be my rent. several years ago now, everyone in my apartment building was evicted, and I thankfully did find an apartment, which is tough nowadays for anyone to find an apartment. So I was very lucky in that sense. But now my rent is more than half of my income. It's quite expensive. And since I moved in here, of course, it goes up year after year. So for sure, rent is my absolute biggest expense.
And the fact that now you have on top of rent, groceries are more expensive. I know you don't have a car, but the price of gas is up, which contributes to other things. How are you juggling that? What kind of choices are you making?
I mean, I've had to cut out, as much as I can in terms of frivolous spending, I guess you could say it. I've cut down on, I don't go out anymore to dinner or events or things like that. I've really cut back on that. I'm very mindful at the grocery store as to what I'm buying and trying to only shop sales or deals or what I absolutely need. Trying to get everything to stretch as far as I can. But, with my rent continuing to go up and the price of groceries continuing to go up, and I don't have a car, you're right, but I mean, that still impacts everything else, right? Like I do take the bus passes will go up, groceries, of course, will go up because of that. And so it's been really hard trying to get that to stretch more and more. And so it's just me cutting back on things more and more to the point that there is nothing more for me to cut back on. Like I've gotten to the point of I'm out of ideas and I'm out of things to cut back on to try and make, my income stretch as far as I can.
So what are the other ideas then? If you can't cut more, I guess the other option is to try and find more income.
Yeah, exactly. So I have been looking for a second job. It hasn't been going well. I do have a lot of experience in retail, so I've just been looking for a part-time retail job because usually, I mean, from what I remember, they were always easy to pick up. I'm available evenings and weekends, and so that's usually when employers have the hardest time to try and schedule, and it's not been going well, to be honest. There's a lot of other people who are looking for either secondary jobs or sometimes third jobs or just looking for jobs in general. And so I've been applying and I have not even gotten to the interview stage, which I said I'm looking for part-time. I have quite extensive experience in retail and it's just not happening. So that's
what would
one thought.
What would be helpful for you then? I know you're single, so you don't qualify probably for a lot of the benefits the government puts forward, but what would be helpful for someone like you right now?
I did in Nova Scotia, there is a rent subsidy. A friend of mine had told me about, I believe it was last year that I looked into it. And because she had a different friend who was still in a similar situation, so she told me about this rent subsidy and I looked into it. And unfortunately, I don't qualify because even though I pay more than half of my income towards rent, what they look at is that you need to spend more than 40% of your pre-tax income on rent. And I mean, if anyone got their pre-tax income, they would be in a little bit of a better situation, right? But everyone pays taxes, of course. And so I don't qualify. I'm just over the amount because it is based on pre-tax income. And so I think that, that is something that could be really helpful is rent subsidies help with rent because there aren't cheaper places to live, right? Rent is incredibly expensive and I don't really have any other option. It's right. Like I have to pay my rent, have to have some place to live. And the other thing would be something with groceries, like something needs to happen with grocery prices. Like they just keep going up and they are not going down. And I don't know kind of what the solution is there, but that is something that would definitely impact, everybody, not just myself, of course, but that would be another very impactful thing if something could be done there.
Okay. Keely Corrigan, thank you. I appreciate your time.
No, thank you so much.